Welcome to the Multigen Mini Masterclass, where we explore the magic and the challenges of multi-generational living. In this series, we're bringing you podcast-style interviews with real families, sharing their stories, lessons, and experiences. Plus, we've got guest experts providing invaluable tips, advice, and practical tools. Our goal? To help you navigate and thrive in this unique lifestyle that's more popular than ever. Whether you're considering going multi-gen or already living it, we want to be your go-to resource for all things multi-generational living. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in.
Okay, good.
Hello, welcome to the Multi-Gen Mini Masterclass. Today we are diving into a topic that is becoming increasingly important as families navigate high real estate costs and longer lifespans, multi-generational living. Whether you're dreaming of multi-gen living like a family compound or you're already navigating your way to something else under one roof, today's episode is packed with a lot of insights and some fun storytelling. So I'm really thrilled to introduce today's guest, Henry Robinson. Henry is the amazing realtor who helped us find our needle in a haystack, Marshwinds. Um, this property, I mean, I call it a unicorn property, and because I know how hard it was to find. And Henry did everything he could to help us make it possible. And, you know, what's even more special, just to kind of give everyone the backstory, Henry and I met, it was probably what, 20 years ago, Henry? It's been a
Almost,
long
almost,
time.
almost. Yeah, yeah.
Been a long
You were a kid.
time. And
Yeah.
and like so many of us, we stayed in touch on social media and kind of followed along with each other's adventures. And I had been watching Henry's real estate star in Charleston kind of rise. And because I knew him, I knew that when we started going down this path, that it gave me peace of mind knowing that we already aligned on some of that big stuff that was important to our family, which was like communication, attention to detail, being able to think outside the box. And Henry, that's, I think, one of the things that made the most impact for our partnership. Um, yeah, and so
Thank you, Erin.
so thank you again for as we
Yeah,
reminisce
yeah,
down there.
yeah.
Um, Let me just, so I'll give your formal introduction so folks know who you are. Henry is a seasoned real estate pro with incredible experience. Before he came back to Charleston, he sold luxury properties. It was all over the Caribbean, right?
Correct. You're
He
Ireland and the Caribbean. Yeah.
See, I mean, and just well traveled like we are too. Another thing that just felt so aligned. He is an expert at finding rare, hard to find properties, multi-generational or not. And even that luxury real estate piece, which was so important to us because I feel like our property kind of straddles that line a little bit. Um, yeah, and he even has a personal connection, right, with your sister and her husband, right? Recently moving in to help with your dad, who's 93.
Correct.
Yeah.
Almost,
So, I
almost
mean,
94.
it's going to be good. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here today. I'm excited for everybody to learn from you.
Thanks, Erin. I hope I can help.
Yeah. Anything you want to say, or did I miss anything in your?
Uh, no, you didn't miss anything. Uh, Other than I've got this Facebook page, Interesting Homes of Charleston. So I like properties. Your home. I wrote about your home on Interest that Marshwinds,
Yeah.
and it went viral because it's just such a terribly unique property, even without the multi-generational aspect. It's a marsh island. It's an island within Charleston, so it's exceptional, and I love exceptional. I hate cookie cutter, and exceptional doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be have unique characteristics and qualities that resonate with the right buyer. It's not every buyer's the right buyer, but when the right buyer sees something different and unique and compelling, they jump on it, which is what happened with Marshwinds. You guys knew quickly. I knew quickly.
Yeah.
Then we just had to get it under contract. Yeah.
Which,
Anyway,
and that's one of the things I talk about on this channel so much is the importance of trusting that feeling, knowing that that feeling, don't jump at the first thing that fits the bill. Don't act from a place of what if I don't find the right thing. I should just take this. And that's one thing that I think you really got about us. And I know that sometimes you probably wanted to just wring my neck because I would, be like, oh no, but this, but this, but this. And I think it's so important though, that feeling. And
Mhm.
you, I know working with buyers, especially you watch people get that feeling when they walk into a property.
Homes are like kind of like spouses. You meet you you go in, you date a few, you meet a few, you see a few houses. Finally, you're like, oh my God, that's the one. That's the one.
It's the best feeling.
Even with the quirks, that's the one.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah, yeah,
let's start with your personal connection to multi-generational living, kind of peripherally. So your sister
correct.
and her husband, your
Fiance, but yeah, yeah, yeah,
fiance, okay, they're in upstate New York, where your dad
correct.
lives, and your dad is,
Whoa,
from what I have seen from your social media and heard from you, he's a very active, very spry, 93, soon to be 94 years old. Um,
correct.
so
He's
talk to,
changing though. He's
is
aging.
he?
Do you want me to give you want me to give you the short version of what happened or no?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So my sister and her fiance lived in Woodstock, New York, which is again upstate New York, a couple hours north of the city, and they lived in a beautiful house. And my dad lives in New Paltz, New York, a half hour away, closer to New York City, but still an hour and a half north of New York. And my dad's in a very large, almost 6,000 square foot home that was built in
Wow.
1830. It was built in 1830, and it's 3 stories. And he's having a harder time getting up steps, and his needs are increasing. Even though he's spry, he forgets to make dinner. Something, he just typical things that happen as your parents age. And we didn't know the right thing. Should he sell the house? Should we keep it in the family? And I had this idea one day that Nick and Jenny might want to sell their house, which had appreciated greatly. At the same time, create a basement apartment for my father, put in what is called an acorn. It's an electronic lift up the stairs. And so they built a basement apartment, put in a kitchen. There was already a beautiful bath down there. And then Jenny and her fiance Nick, they sold their house in Woodstock, did some nice renovations on the primary 2 floors. And about 4 months ago, 3 months ago, they moved in. And then my dad comes up the lift, the acorn lift, about 2 or 3 times a week to join them for dinner. Nick's a great cook, and everybody's happy. And my dad gets looked after. My sister does his grocery shopping, checks on him every day, and it's worked really well. And by the same token, financially, it worked well for my sister's fiance, who sold his house at the top of the market. And they'll probably buy their dream home at the time when my father, transitions, probably. So
Okay, okay. What an
yeah,
amazing, I'm a firm believer that there are no coincidences. Like this was meant to be, but how great that these stars aligned, that your sister and her fiance were able to move. So many people can't just move an hour and a half, and they could sell their house for a profit. And that your dad was probably, the fact that he was open to this. I hear people say that, it's hard to admit when you're struggling or when your independence is questioned. How has your
correct.
dad dealt with, I mean, has he had any of those feelings, or has it been like, I'm very thankful that they're here?
Yeah. 10 years ago, I think he would have been, they would have been cramping his space.
Okay.
He's highly independent, but now he absolutely welcomed the opportunity. They're actually going on vacation. They're going to go to the Caribbean, Jenny and Nick, next week. And my dad is a little uptight, because he depends on them. So we're going to have somebody on standby if he needs a little help. He can still cook. He can still do 98% of what young active people do. But, he's getting up there. He's going to be 94 in March. And so he's thrilled. He's thrilled. And my sister and her fiance, they have their independence. They're on 2 separate floors, and they'll go a couple of days without seeing each other. But my sister will go down almost every day and check on him.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
How
it's
have
worked out really
they
well.
what were those boundaries? Were they established just naturally, organically, or has there been conversations around, we're not going to eat together every day, or this is kind of how this is going to look? What were there conversations like that?
I think so. It happens to be that was our family house. So it's the house my sister and I grew up in, and
Okay.
we've been there. He's been there. He bought it in 1971, I think, 72 maybe.
Wow.
So over 50 years ago. Um, and my sister is not. She's a little bit loosey goosey. She kind of goes with the flow, and I don't think it was established up front, but I think it's kind of turned into 2 or 3 nights a week. They call him up or text him or go down and say, "Hey, you want to come up for dinner tonight?" And Nick likes my dad a great deal. My dad's an author. He's a funny old guy and always has great stories to tell. And it's been really a blessing. And my sister loves my dad, so I could what she's doing, I couldn't do, but she can. God bless her.
Why, what makes you say, I'm curious, what makes you say you would struggle with that?
I mean, it's more of a. I mean, you know the relationship you're with your parents, and I love my dad to pieces, but it's it would just other than I would love to help him, the helping part,
Right.
if he needs going to the grocery store, making a meal, absolutely. I just don't. I'm independent, so I don't need to see my dad every day. Selfishly, um, maybe my kids. I don't know. Maybe my kids won't need to see me. They don't see me every day, but I'm and my sister is by nature more of a caregiver, so he,
Sure.
everything worked out as it should, as it should.
Does your sister
She
have children?
she does not. She does
Okay,
not.
so
She has
there
a
will not be kids coming or adult children coming or any of that.
occasionally. Nick has got two adult sons. They visit occasionally. They live a little bit further away, so but
Okay.
that's fine. It's a huge house. There's
Yeah,
plenty of
it
room for
sounds
all of
like
them.
there's plenty of space.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
so
It's like
awesome
it's
for
like it's like Marshwinds, other than it's more vertical. It's 3 stories.
sure. Well, and I think that that's a good point that you make. We knew going into our search that having two homes on the same property was very important. And we didn't know, that vision of what that looked like evolved, as you know, over the 2 year period that we spent looking for this home. Because eventually, when you think two homes, you think two separate buildings. And
It's not always the case.
it's not always the case. And I kind of thank you for encouraging us to kind of broaden that mindset because two homes can absolutely be within the same building or strategically it doesn't have to be two buildings. And so it really opened up our search. And it sounds like for your dad and your sister that they have two homes in this giant house that
Hmm.
really because privacy is so important. Like for us, I don't think any of the five of us, other than the nuclear families, but I don't think any of us want to see each other every day. And my parents are not in a place where that I need to check on or do anything, but
Right.
it's that nice feeling of knowing that you're establishing the boundaries and you're building your space to allow for that privacy so everyone feels that they've got the oasis that they need and that they're
Yeah.
not being infringed upon or crowded.
Yeah. Yeah. And another point about a lot of houses, I see it in Charleston, probably other markets as well. The two homes are rarely equivalent. Usually there's a primary home and the second home is like a guest cottage. It can be pretty, it could be nice, it could be an ADU that's on Airbnb. It's not necessarily substantial enough. And we ran into that. We saw a few second homes that your parents were like, right?
Right.
And so it worked at Marshwinds, it works at my dad's house, but some people don't want to live in the 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 450 square foot ADU,
Exactly. And
accessory dwelling unit, for those who don't know what ADU is.
exactly. And you're right. We did run into that and it was very important in some of our things that we found. I think it was even me because I know this is going to be my parents' forever home and I don't want them to have to give. I mean, they worked their whole lives to get very, happy with what, where they were. And I don't want them to have to, the same way I think it's so good that your dad, you said you explored different options. The fact that he's able to stay in his home and his routine and his familiar without having to move,
And can
wonderful.
I interject another thing? Because this is as people are exploring this option, it, there's a huge tax advantage to a family member, a parent, not selling their home and actually giving it to their children. Do you understand that or no? Or do you want to
Yes,
understand that?
but go ahead and explain. I have experienced this, but I want you to
Yeah.
explain it.
I'll just do round numbers, for example. Let's say you buy a house 30 years ago for $200,000 and it's now $1 million, just round numbers. And an aging parent decides to sell the house because he needs to downsize. He is going to pay, now he gets a one-time write-off from the IRS, but he's going to pay appreciation on that $800,000 less I want to say $250,000 deduction. Um, so he's going to pay taxes. My father's single. He's going to pay taxes on probably, in his case, it would have been probably $700,000 of appreciation.
See.
If you, right, so a couple $100,000 goes to the IRS. If you leave the home in a trust to your children, the day they inherit it, the home is appraised. If it appraises, again, round numbers for $1 million, and we end up selling it for $1,100,000, we're only paying on that $100,000, not on that $900,000 gap. Um, so it pays if you can afford to keep a house in the family. The benefactors, the recipients will benefit greatly from a tax standpoint.
That is such excellent, and I love you explained it perfectly and simply because I know that that kind of stuff is tricky to navigate
Yeah,
because there's lots of um, fine print when it comes to stuff like that. But you're right. I think that's such something to consider, and a lot of times, original family homes are part of a multi-gen setup. Especially folks like building family compounds. I've talked to folks that, that the main house is set on 10 acres and you start building these other, that's so important to know going in. Absolutely. Let's, before we really dive into real estate, you said something that really made me laugh, which was you have to make sure that you actually like the family that you're sharing a home with. Elaborate on that because I think people, our knee-jerk reaction is, of course, we like these people, but
yeah,
there's more.
yeah.
There's more than that.
There is. Yeah, yes. I mean, it depends if it's parents that you're going to share the house with, or you're the parent and you're going to share it with your adult children. But yeah, you better make sure that you're compatible. And these are discussions, both financially, where you spend your time, how often you see each other. Um, these are critical things. There's a famous author that I love. He has a quote: "If you think you're so enlightened, spend a weekend with your parents." Um,
Very true.
because they can pull you back. They can. I don't want to get into psychology, but people can pull you back into like, oh my God, they used to do this to me when I was in high school, and now they're still doing it to me. So yeah, just make sure that it's a good fit, because ultimately this is buying a home is a major decision. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, and
That
some
can
people you don't want to be doing it like your example. Sure, it's nice to save money, but your parents had a lovely home. You guys had a lovely home. You could have bought a home without your parents. Um, so you didn't do it specifically for cost savings. Maybe there are cost savings. That wasn't your incentive. So make sure that everybody loves their parents. Most people love their parents. Make sure you can live with your parents or or have them nearby in
absolutely.
close
I think that's
proximity.
exactly. And you said the compatibility piece. That's what I was going to suggest is like taking that even a step further is there's, what's the old saying? Sometimes love isn't enough. This is one of those things. Like make sure you're compatible and maybe aligned in the majority of your big thoughts, because otherwise you're going to constantly just butt heads, right? It's
I
anyway.
mean,
All right.
right down to the place where at what point do you have to discuss a home improvement project? Is it $1,000? Is it $5,000? Is it $100? Just little explore.
Absolutely.
It's good to explore all the nuances so the problems are confronted up front, not down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's put on your real estate hat for, phase two of this conversation and let's talk about helping families find, that are searching for their own marsh winds of some sort. And we've talked a lot about the different ways that can look. I mean, it can be a mother-in-law suite, a room over the garage, a guest cottage, a family compound. But what are some of the key factors that you would recommend that families give thought to or consider when looking for a multi-generational property?
Boy, that's a broad question. It's a good question. There are a few things. You need to know local zoning laws because you might find, let's say again, round numbers, your budget's $1 million. You find the perfect $600,000 home, and it has the acreage and the zonability to, so I don't know if that's a word, zonability, but where you could add a second
Right.
home. And we ran into that. James Island, I think if it's you need at least I believe a quarter acre per structure.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. I believe that's the case. So it doesn't have to be an existing home. You might, if you have the time, you might be willing to build that guest cottage. If if you're looking at an established property that already has the housing in place, again, you're going to have to make sure that it works for whoever the sets of people are that are going to live there. Um, if it's aging parents, they may not want a 300 square foot ADU, so you have to make sure that that second property works for whoever it is, parents, kids, whoever it might be. So now you see it a lot also, not just in your situation, but you'll see because of the cost of living in Charleston and other markets, you'll have adult children, not, you know, in their 20s, let's say, could
Right.
be 25 years old. I have children that are going through this, and God, rents in Charleston now, two, three, $4,000. They can't afford to buy a house. And so they're sticking around longer. And these are not deadbeats. These are productive adults, productive adults who don't want to give 50% of their revenue or their income to rent or mortgage. So that is also a scenario that people are exploring. But again, you need privacy, and whether again it could be a mother-in-law suite, it could be a frog room,
Yep.
family room over the. I have a frog. I didn't even tell you this, but I have a frog with a half bath at the base of it, and it's very separate from. There's a separate entrance, and my mother-in-law is coming in from India in the spring, and she's going to stay 5 months with us.
Oh,
So
wow.
we're gonna explore this, but she'll have complete privacy in one wing of the home.
Okay.
Obviously, we'll see her all the time. We only have one kitchen, so we'll see her all the time. But it's conducive to that. Let's say,
Oh, that's
yeah,
exciting for you. I'm excited
yeah,
to hear how
yeah,
it goes. We may have to have
yeah.
a part two of this
Follow up,
conversation in a year and you
yeah,
can update how the
yeah.
five months went.
Hopefully, I'm not pulling out my hair, since we don't speak the same language.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Henry's wife is Indian, right?
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
going to be a,
Her mom speaks very little English. She's lovely, so I think we'll be fine.
oh, that's exciting.
And
I'm
and now
excited.
and now with Google Translate, I mean, literally, you can
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah.
And she's learning English.
That's exciting. There's an
Yeah,
app too. I don't remember what it's called. I think it might be called Talk, but you can speak, you set the language, you speak into it, and it automatically turns it. And so you can just keep going like this. We use it when we travel a good bit, and it's so much easier than having to constantly, that was our old school typing and typing and typing.
yeah, yeah. But just one last point on that. When you're actually working with a realtor and they're trying to find this home, the realtor has to be pretty crafty because you might see a home on the MLS. It says 5 bedrooms. It looks like a typical 5 bedroom home. But then when you read the fine print, you realize there's 3 bedrooms, there's a firewall, there's a separate access, there's a completely second home that's attached to the primary home. It looks like a primary home, or excuse me, one home. It's two homes in one, which is what your home is becoming.
Is becoming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's becoming. And then you had the square footage in your home to craft. There's an existing space and craft a larger space for your parents. Um, so it's not just saying, oh, there aren't two homes on the property. This is a no go. Look at the square footage. It's a 4,000 square foot home. How much would a renovation be where you could turn that into two 2,000 square foot homes? Maybe it's easy. Maybe a second kitchen exists. Just so dive in, and don't just cast away a property because it doesn't look like two families could accommodate it.
Absolutely. And I mean, we are
Yeah.
we are living proof of that very thing that really broadened our perspectives.
And the only thing that made me look at your listing when it came on the market, obviously, it's an amazingly unique home. One family, two family, it's amazing. but it had a second primary,
Yeah.
right? Second primary suite. And so from there, I said, this is worth looking at, sent it to you guys, and boom.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly it went from there. Because again,
Hours.
we're waiting for that feeling and we had the feeling and yeah, it's
When
wonderful.
it hits, even in this market, which isn't as robust as it was 2 years ago, when the right home hits, you're not
Gotta
going to
move
be the
quick.
only one to, you're not going to be the only one to respond to that, you know?
Well,
And
and maybe that's a piece of advice too that I can give is the importance of having your ducks in a row before, that because we had, a couple properties before we found the one where we thought we had found the one. And you have to move quickly because before you know it, you're in this bidding war. And if you don't have your lender letter, if you don't have the relationship established with the realtor and all that paperwork done, and then you're going to miss the boat. So I do think that's a great piece of advice is to when you get started and the train's going out of the station, go ahead and get your paperwork so that you can act when you find the one. Because I've heard of
correct.
people, if it happens in 3 weeks, be ready.
Absolutely.
So talk to me. You've sold luxury properties, around different places, and you've got your really successful Facebook group, Interesting Homes of Charleston, which highlights so many cool and truly unique, fun houses of all different, you know, prices. We'll say that.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
how would you say that finding a luxury home differs from finding a multi-generational home, or how are they similar? Because I would think that there's, a lot of times you got that needle in a haystack aspect with both. How would you say, and what advice do you have for families specifically looking for these truly unique gems, that are different than just the practical house?
That are multi-generational or not
Either, but
necessarily.
yeah,
Okay.
multi-generational or have the capacity.
Well, so when you say luxury property, and so you get, let's typically in Charleston, that would be 1 million plus, let's say.
Mhm.
And it can go to 10 million here. We just had a property sell downtown for 22 million.
I saw
Wasn't my
that.
listing, but yeah, on the Battery. It's massive. That could be three families. I mean, it's huge. It was over 10, I think 12,000 square feet. But um, luxury properties typically, not always, typically indicate that it's going to be somewhat larger. Luxury properties are more prone to having a guest cottage. If you're building a house from scratch now, and let's say you have a big budget, you very well may, at the very least, have a garage apartment. And garage apartment sounds, you're not slumming it in some of these garage apartments. Like if you look at Daniel Island, for example, some of these garage apartments are like a small Ritz-Carlton suite. They're beautiful. Um, so I think people will build either for privacy, for the potential of a parent or a child that wants to live in proximity to the house. They'll build in a guest cottage. As you get into homes that are over, let's say, 4 to 5 to 6,000 square feet, if they're not currently set up for two families, they could be converted. And
Sure.
while we don't have basements in Charleston per se, because of the water table and the water levels, other parts of the country have basements. Like my father's house, that in basement sounds like dusty and dingy. His
Right.
basement's it's just a floor down. The windows are actually, you're looking out at kind of ground level. So the windows are, you're looking at the ground. You're not looking at, it's above ground, but you're
Sure.
looking, at the ground. Um, it's actually really cozy down there. You have got natural protection from the earth, natural insulation. It's really nice. But yeah, so these are factors that if you're, I think they go hand in hand. If you have a large, now the question, the real good question is, what if we don't have a big budget? How do we find that property? Because if you have a big budget, um, you can either build a second home. It has a guest cottage. It has the square footage that you could take a wing and convert it. You don't have a big budget. This is realistic for a lot of people today. A lot of people they don't have that big budget, and for them, they're going to have to, again, is there acreage enough to build a second home? Does the existing home lend itself to dividing it up in some capacity? Um, or has somebody, and you see this even on James Island and other, you see in Somerville, um, is there an existing like Airbnb unit or short-term rental unit, an ADU that would work for my children or my parents or whoever that second party is.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good
And
idea
that's
too.
and that's becoming increasingly people think about it, and you talk about this quite a bit, is what's the word? Uh your what is it, a side gig? No, what do people call it? Your side hustle.
Yep.
You know, people have side hustles and you may be a full-time employee somewhere, but you have your Airbnb.
Right.
And that Airbnb, if you have it, it could actually become your children's home, your parents' home, something like
Absolutely.
that.
That's a yeah, great point.
Yeah.
Well, and that's as we're talking about kind of costs and how things are changing. When I was just starting out, and I'm sure when you were just starting out, kind of the typical timeline was you got out of school and then you started your job, and then pretty soon you bought your first house, and then you kept rolling that money into next houses. In today's market, it's really not feasible for a lot of people. Like you said, you've got these folks coming out of college, grad school, and they're getting these jobs, but even with what we would have considered amazing salaries, they can't afford homes. So that kind of leads me to my next question. As people start living longer and real estate costs continue to rise, I think that is those two reasons are why multi-generational living is continuing to it's almost one in five homes, one in five sales right now are somehow tied to multi-generational properties. So how do you see this trend evolving in the coming
Yeah.
decade?
Yeah. And you're right. It's now, I think I sent you that. It was 11% in 2021. We're multi-generational now, 17% just 3 years later. Huge increase.
Yeah,
And that's driven by, and you think about, you mentioned groups that can't afford housing. There are others that can't afford to move because they're locked into a 3% mortgage, you
right,
know, and even though they can now afford more home, they're affording more home with a 7% mortgage. You're not getting more home.
right.
It'd be a lateral move. So what can you do to your existing home? Can you again add that ADU? Can you stay where you are and make the home feasible for multi-generation? But I think more people are I think they're absolutely, you put it this way, when you see a good home on, I live on James Island, so I know James Island very well, suburb of Charleston. Um, if you live in and there are a lot of 60s ranches here, and you
Yeah.
know 60s ranches from Somerville, but you live in a good 60s ranch which has been renovated. Um, uh, if there's a way you can get an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit on that property, it's going to pay dividends, both as a short-term rental or perhaps as a home for your parents or children. And when it comes time to sell that, it adds tremendous value. You're going to get back what you put in because people are going to see either they're going to see cash flow through an Airbnb or a necessity for their aging parents or adult, young adult children. Um, so I think even if you're looking at your first home and you have a meager budget, meager in Charleston sadly is now like $500,000. It's so sad. Um, but see if there's acreage, if there's the ability to either expand the existing footprint or build a second home. You may not have the money today, but have the vision to think forward. Maybe my parents would move down from Illinois. Maybe I could have an Airbnb. Um, that's smart thinking.
I think that could be some of the best advice, and we'll kind of wrap up here. The importance of having a vision, of taking the time to get your vision clear. Because one, it's really hard to find something if you're not clear or if you're easily kind of just following the trends or following I think it's important to have a vision and then be able to look ahead at I call it a North Star. But like you said, even if you're not doing these things right this second, plan for them because I think that's how these things kind of will take shape eventually is the pre-planning. So I guess that would be my question. In addition to that piece of advice, what if folks watching are ready to start their multi-gen journey, what would you say could be one actionable step that would be a good place to start that they could take right now?
Such a
Not to
good
put you on the
question.
spot. No, no pressure.
Yeah, yeah. It is a hard question, but I just think when you're looking, and again, if the multi-generational journey is going to begin with that next purchase, then you specifically have to look for that property. If you need that property, let's say within the next 6 months, it may not be feasible to have an extra half acre where you could build a second cottage. There's permits, there's architects, there's engineers. It may take too long. You may not have the wherewithal, the budget. That's a big project.
Right.
So either find the property that's ready to go, even if it might be a garage apartment that needs tweaking or something that needs a little bit of updating, but look for have your agent specifically look for properties that meet that criteria. If you're looking more long term, um, that's a lot of vision. It takes a lot of vision when, let's say, your parents are 70 and healthy, to be thinking what's going to happen when they're 85 and not as healthy as you're buying a home. You're 40 years old, you're buying a nice home in Charleston. If you can have that vision, more power to you. Like for my mother-in-law, for example, we decided in our a wing of the house near the garage, near our laundry area, there was air, and then we have the frog. There was a perfect spot. Not We couldn't get a full bath. We have enough full baths, but perfect spot for a powder room to accommodate that frog. We dropped it in. I know a great local builder and contractor, and it's going to be perfect either for guests or for my mother-in-law. So, you know, we had that space to do that.
Right. And being
When I bought the house,
strategic.
but when I bought the house, I didn't know I was going to do that.
Right.
I didn't have
That's
that vision then. I wasn't even married, so you know what I mean. It's like sometimes you just get a good house that's conducive to that. So luck can play a part in it. Luck can play a part in it.
I love that.
But people that find good properties, if you do the legwork when you come in, so you just want, let's say, a normal single family home, your typical 2,000 square foot ranch on James Island for $700,000, and you buy that house, you might talk to zoning to say, does this property allow for a detached ADU or a detached garage and apartment unit? And that may be 5, 10 years down the road, but you have that capability. So that's a good thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I think it all boils down to truly taking the time to get clear and do your planning in advance to give thought to what is the purpose of this property? What is it going to look like now versus 10 years from now? And checking as you get your ideas to make sure that they're doable, that it's feasible, whether it's now or down the road. So planning and vision. Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more. Lovely. Well, thank you. This has been lovely. I know that
I
everyone
enjoyed it.
has gotten so much insights from you, and I appreciate you joining us. And yeah, I want to follow up in a year after your mother-in-law has
Oh
lived in
gosh.
a frog. I can't wait.
And all your guests can find me on henryrobinson.com.
I will put that absolutely in the description so they will be able to find
Awesome.
all the goodness. Thank you so much,
All
Henry.
right. Erin, have a great day.